Welcome to another episode of Erik Waite Whiskey Studies, and in this video, gonna be doing a review and talking about the Laphroaig Islay Single Malt Scotch Whisky. However, I'm not gonna be doing this alone. I have a special guest all the way from Scotland, and yet he's here in the United States. I actually found out about his channel through the Whiskey Vault. He had a comment in the Whiskey Vault. I saw the name of his channel. I thought, oh, I'm gonna check that out. And so I've been watching him, enjoying his content. And I thought, and at first I was assuming he was in Scotland. I found out he's here in the United States. So I thought, you know what, time-wise, it'll probably work. We could do a collaboration. So let me bring him on. Hey, how you doing, Rob? You want to introduce yourself?
Doing great, Erik. Thanks for having you. My name's Rob. Really honoured to be on your channel. I have a very small baby channel called Scotch Scripture. And just kind of feeling my way through the murky world of YouTube. trying not to get trashed in the comments. So
there you go. So for those who, or for the Americans who didn't understand what he just said, he said his name is Rob. He has a channel called Scotch and Scripture. So right. Sometimes we have to translate for the Americans in case they don't understand what you're saying.
That's my life story since living in the States.
So, all right. So, at your recommendation, you suggested the Laphroaig lore. So I went and picked up a bottle. I had a little last night, and I just had a little now. So mine is fairly newly opened, and I like to say, don't judge a whiskey by a neck pour. But thus far, I got to say, I really like this one. Yeah. But before we dig into this, here are my notes. The Laphroaig Lower Islay Single Malt Scotch Whisky is heavily peated, matured in a marriage of casks from 7 to 21 years, including ex-bourbon casks, European oak casks, ex-Oloroso sherry casks, and quarter casks. It is bottled at 48% alcohol by volume and sells for around $120 in my neighborhood. So, you're from Scotland, you're here in the United States, you're left coast, east coast, central, where you're at generally?
Yeah, I live just south of Nashville, Tennessee. I lived in Denver, Colorado for the longest time, for about almost 15 years. My wife's from Colorado, and we moved to Tennessee along with, seems like the rest of America, about a year and a half ago. Tennessee's blowing up. So I'm about 30 minutes south of Nashville proper, close to Franklin. And yeah, I love it. Tennessee. Actually, Tennessee reminds me a lot of Scotland, Erik. Kind of rolling green hills, really kind of friendly people, don't take themselves too seriously. So I found myself just really loving being here.
So what brought you to Nashville? Is it, and obviously you have some fiddles or violins behind you?
Yeah, I've got a couple of guitars there on keyboard and stuff. And so I'm not in my YouTube studio at the moment. We're for various reasons, so I had to do this in the little music studio here tonight. But I came to Nashville for a couple of reasons. One is my job moved here, my work moved here, and honestly, it was one of those things where there was a lot of questioning and carefully considering and prayer and all the rest of it. And we just felt as a family it was a good time for us to move. So. There's 4 of us, myself, my wife, my 2 boys who are both teenagers, and we just found ourselves here, and it's been great. Honestly, okay. Love it.
So for those who don't know, have been watching. So on my channel, I don't talk about religion, politics, sports. I lived on a golf course years back out in the wine country, but I never talk about. I will bring in wine when it relates to whiskey, but other than that, I don't talk about wine. And of course, my mind thinks in wine categories. But I got into wine when I was in seminary. I went to Westminster Theological Seminary and Fuller Theological Seminary, so I have 2 seminary degrees. And that's how I got into wine. And then years later, got into whiskey, and then the rest is history. So, so I have two studies. I have another, library of theology books and loads of Bibles. I have whiskey and wine books on my first floor down there where I watch Whiskey Tube. And I actually, so I have another interest. I have a whole room dedicated to Star Trek. I got like 400 starships. Well, I work for NASA. Which kind of goes hand in hand with Star Trek.
Yeah, that's good.
But I don't ever talk about theology. But I have met a lot of Christians in the whiskey world.
Yeah.
He worked for Glenmorangie for 19 years. He's a pastor of a church up in Elgin. He teaches for the Edinburgh Whiskey Academy. And I've enjoyed visiting churches while I'm over in Scotland. I visited Glasgow Cathedral in Glasgow.
Yep.
I visited now they're not necessarily within my same theological tradition, like a church up in Dornoch when I was up near Balblair, way up north.
Yep.
So I like to visit some of these older historic churches when I'm over there in Scotland. So with music, so are you a professional musician, or do you do play music with church for church?
I've gone through various cycles of that in my life. I have been at a couple of points in my life. I've been professional. At one point, I was a professional songwriter, doing kind of pop music in London. But most of my career, if you want to call it a career, most of that's been either playing in bands or playing in church. I was a worship pastor for a while. One of the nice things about moving to Nashville has been just really getting back into that. I found Denver at times to be a little bit of an island, you know. There's certainly a lot of great musicians and good stuff happening in Denver, but Nashville's just a different level, you know.
Yeah.
And it's been a tonic for the soul, I'll say,
Sure.
In more ways than one. But musically, it's been fantastic. But yeah, it was for a while. I had a deal with a label in London where I was writing pop music for various people. But it's just honestly, it's such a difficult world to be in. And talk about an island. I mean, I was living in the west of Scotland when we took a 4-year move back to Scotland in 2012. We were there from 2012 to 16. It was supposed to be permanent, but you know, things happen. And during that time, I didn't even live in Glasgow, where we're kind of from. I lived in like the kind of west coast and really in the middle of nowhere in terms of like the music industry. So it's so nice for me to be here where it's all happening and kind of associating with a lot of guys. And there's so many guys in my church that are that you probably know their names. And it's been really nice to kind of just be back in that scene at that level. So it's been great.
So where in Scotland are you originally from?
I'm from a village called Laphroaig, which is about 20 minutes west of Glasgow.
Okay.
So for easiness, I just tell people, you know, we're from Glasgow.
Sure.
But true Glaswegians wouldn't like that. So we're about 20 minutes west of Glasgow.
Okay. So you're probably not too far from Glengoyne?
No, not far from Glen. In fact, the closest distillery to where I grew up would be Auchentoshan.
Okay. Okay. So I've been there before. So let's talk a little bit about Laphroaig.
Yes.
So now people might assume you're from Scotland, therefore you grew up with Scotch whiskey, therefore you've always been. How did you get into whiskey?
Yeah, so Scotch whisky obviously is something we're proud of as a nation, and it's something that we kind of project to other people. Scottish people have this amazing knack of being able to recall almost everything we've invented for centuries, and so you know we'll tell you, you know, we'll tell you at length about all the things that have been invented in Scotland, penicillin, you know, the unit of electricity measurement, the watt. There's so many you know, I'm not doing it justice, but when it came to whiskey, honestly, I probably in my youth wasn't exactly where I am now in my faith, and kind of lived a little bit in the wild side. So whiskey really was just blends and like the cheapest stuff we could find, and you know, mixing it and drinking it.
Drinking Bucky's.
It's a lot of Bells and Grants and just kind of the cheap White and Mackay cheap blends. But I got into single malt. We went back to Scotland on vacation a couple of years, 4 years ago now, I think, 3 or 4 years ago. And my wife and I, we went for a few days on Skye. Left the kids with my parents, and Skye is just beautiful.
Yeah,
and,
terrible roads. I got a flat tire going to Talisker.
It's not for the faint-hearted, but but it's a gorgeous place. And so we had one of those meals that you have I have very infrequently, when you drop a few quid, as we'd say, on a couple of nice plates. And at the end of this meal, um, they presented like a sort of cheese board menu, and then there was a single malt menu, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to go for it. And the only one I recognised was Lagavulin 16, owing to being a fan of Ron Swanson, and so I thought I'm going to check that out. So I ordered a Lagavulin 16 in a Glencairn, and completely ignorant, didn't know anything about how to drink whiskey, how to enjoy it, so I just kind of sipped it, and I probably didn't enjoy it that much, but for some reason it just stuck with me all night. I couldn't get it out of my head. And then as we were driving home a couple of days later, I was actually starting to annoy my wife, and she was like, "Would you shut up about whiskey?" Like she was like, "You're just trying to be more Scottish." And I was like, "I'm telling you, something's come alive in me." And she was like, she just wasn't having it, and it just kind of sent me down a rabbit hole. And so when we get back to Denver, a good friend of ours came down, and I told her about it, and she bought me a bottle of Talisker 10, which is the first bottle that I owned for myself. And so I did a lot of my learning with Talisker 10, but it's just been a rabbit hole. And I think anybody that starts to get into single malt Scotch in particular, there's just something different about it compared to other whiskies. I don't know if it's the history or the nostalgia of it, or the regions, but as you know, it's just such a rabbit hole. And then when you kind of find out what you like, I mean, Laphroaig 10 for me was kind of the clincher. As soon as I had Laphroaig 10, I was like, this feels like, this feels like something that I should know. Yeah. And I've just enjoyed it ever since. So the lore's a fantastic expression from Laphroaig, but I love the 10-year. I love the 10-year sherry oak if I can ever find it. That's a fantastic bottle. But yeah, that's kind of how I got into it. So I grew up with single malt all around me, and never got into it until we went back on holiday.
Yeah. Well, so Roy over at Aquavite has a similar story. No, he didn't get into whiskey till late in life, but you kind of have that one that's sort of like a hallelujah moment. And it's just like the complexity, the layers, the intensity, and the variety of aromas and flavors. And you're just like, how do they do this?
How do they do it?
And for me, I'm a perpetual student, and I want to know, wait a minute, how do you do this? And then, so even within wine, it wasn't the wine I became ultimately fascinated with. It was the beauty of the wine country and production and the yeast. There's like 3,000 different grapes. What?
Yeah.
And next thing you know, you want to know.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, you're just studying, or at least I am just studying like crazy. Yeah. And so my time is split between studying theology and studying whiskey these days. And yet I've had all kinds of other various topics that I've studied in, but that tends to be, I've narrowed it down to basically these two different topics. And for the average American, a lot of teetotalers, they'd tell you to repent or something. but thankfully I'm from a Presbyterian background, which is from Scotland. And there's actually a cocktail called the Presbyterian.
That's right.
And John Knox, sort of the early founders of Presbyterianism, from Scotland, so forth. Yeah. So within the Presbyterian circles, it fits better than with the more fundamental Baptist background that I sort of grew up with.
Yeah. I will say that when I had the idea for the channel, two things that happened quickly. One was I was actually amazed. I couldn't find anybody doing it on YouTube, and I was really surprised at that. And I thought that can't be. So I kind of snapped up the handle, and then on Instagram as well, which I haven't really paid any attention to, if I'm being honest. But I sat in it for a while, Eric, because I kind of had those same reservations. I was like, do I really want to expose myself to somebody getting annoyed at me, or there's so many channels now with social media of Christian commentators that are kind of going after bad takes on theology or just things that they don't like. And I just thought that I really want to expose myself to that. But I'll be honest with you, after kind of sitting on it for quite a while and praying about it, and is this really a good idea or not? And I'm still not convinced that it's a good idea, by the way. But I sat in it for a while, and then when I finally did launch into it, I've been amazed. And it's, like I say, it's a really small channel right now, but I've been amazed at the encouragement that I've gotten through the comments, and even people that have reached out to me from people that I knew 20 years ago that aren't Christians, that just like the kind of positive, hopefully positive, encouraging. That sounds like Caleb, but positive kind of.
For those who don't know, Caleb is a radio station.
Yeah, that's right. And they're like 20 minutes up the road from me here. But I think it's been quite gratifying to have people say, "Hey, I needed this." That's surprised me the most, because I really don't. I'm not a qualified theologian. I work for a theology school. I'm around theologians all the time. I have been a Christian for a while, and I've taken my Bible seriously for probably the last 20 years of my life. But so I kind of have a disclaimer on my channel that I'm not a pastor. I'm not a qualified theologian. I'm not a teacher.
Pastor?
I'm not. I was
spaghetti. You're not tortellini. You're not any of these pastas.
I know. Yeah, I don't know what I'd be. But yeah, it's been pretty gratifying, and I think
we pronounce the R here in the United States. Pastor, not pasta.
I roll my R's too much, I think. But yeah, no, it's been gratifying, and as long as it stays in that place where it's doing some good, I'll keep doing it. If it ever got to the point where it was, causing a problem or whatever, but it's one of those things you kind of have to kind of stand on your convictions, and I don't have a conviction that there's anything wrong with, consuming alcohol as a believer. I think that we all have our hills to die on, and that's definitely not one of mine. And so I don't concern myself too much with that.
Sure. So I'm sure most people watching are familiar with Laphroaig. You're talking Laphroaig, you're talking about intense peat. So on the nose, what are you getting?
Okay. I mean, it's definitely there. The peat's there. The thing that surprises me about the lore is you don't have that medicinal note that you have with the 10. At least it's not as strong. It's nowhere near as strong.
Yeah.
And you definitely have a bit of maritime little sea salt in there. And I find you get this kind of rich chocolatey type note on there.
And a dark chocolate. A dark chocolate.
Yeah, like a dark chocolate, like a 70% cocoa or cacao. Or whatever you
yeah. So if you think of Ugadal, which is also sherry cask, it's more chocolate covered raisins.
Yeah.
And if I was tasting this blind, I'll take a wee sip. This is so dark.
Yeah.
If I was tasting this blind, I would actually think it could be Pedro Jimenez, except it's not as intensely sweet as a Pedro Jimenez. You know what I mean?
I do. It's incredibly rich and deep.
Oh yeah.
I think the Ugadal is a really good comparison. I've said before, I think this one, the lower and the Ugadal and probably the Octomore for me are the kind of the trifecta of depth with smoke. It's almost like the richness of the peat is really the hero, I think, in this whiskey. And but it doesn't, the sweetness doesn't die. You get so like Kulila, for example. Like I've got a bottle of Kulila 12 that I did a review on recently, and I felt with Kulila like the sweetness kind of get drowned out by the bitterness of the smoke.
Yeah. And
I think that with the lore, you don't lose the sweetness. So it's a really well-rounded whiskey, and it sits so nicely on the palate. I think it ticks every box.
So what do you get on the palate then?
On the palate, let me just take a little sip here.
So have you had Loch Gorm from Kilholman?
Mm-hmm.
To me, this comes across a little bit more like a Loch Gorm.
Mm.
It's that darker, richer character there.
Mm. You definitely get that ash. This is the richness I'm talking about. You get that ashy. So it's almost like you get the full circle of the bonfire. You get the bonfire as it's flaming up, and there's smoke coming up in the nose, and then on the palate, and then the finish you get the ash, the kind of morning after. And I really love that. Yeah, little bit of little spice on there as well.
Yeah. So one of the things about, so for example, wine's easy. Wine's obvious because wine is mentioned in the book of Isaiah, vineyards. Obviously, Jesus makes references to vineyards. I am the vine, you are the branches, so forth.
Yep.
Obviously, sacramental Wine comes into play, obviously, in the Lord's Supper. John chapter 6 and so forth. Whereas whiskey probably wasn't invented yet, although barley is mentioned in the book of Ruth. Boaz was a barley farmer, and he meets Ruth. Ruth is doing the gleaning from the barley fields,
Yeah.
But so I have a friend of mine. He thinks I think they were making beer because you're not just making all bread with that barley. They might have been used to feed the cattle as well.
Right.
But they probably didn't have distillation yet, but they were probably beer is mentioned in the Bible as well. So they probably weren't making some beer and bread back in the day, which is halfway to making whiskey.
Halfway, almost there.
Almost there, halfway.
Sorry, even Jesus' illustrations of wine and wineskins. I mean, it's all throughout Scripture. It's such an interesting debate about, Christians and alcohol, because it's not there by mistake. You can't separate Jesus from his words, and using the illustrations of new wine and how burst wineskins and it's there all the way throughout. The wedding at Cana, the first miracle of Jesus was turning the water into wine, and then
John chapter 2.
Yep. So I mean, you can't separate that. So yeah.
Well, the funny thing is, so do you know who Brad Whittington is?
Yeah, I know the name.
That's Daniel's dad.
Is it?
Yeah, Daniel's father. So Brad Whittington wrote a book on what would Jesus drink.
You're joking.
I had autograph. No.
Do you know what's funny about that? So Daniel went and he's been doing some shorts recently, not shorts on YouTube, but shorter. He's been doing these little deliveries about a certain topic, and I actually commented on one of his things and said, Daniel, why are you not a pastor? And he wrote back and he said, I'm pretty sure there are some other stipulations required or something. But
his grandfather was a pastor.
That does not surprise me. He's got something about him. I'm a big fan of both of those guys. But it doesn't surprise me that that's in his lineage. That's interesting.
So anyway, so the funny thing is, so whiskey isn't mentioned in the Bible. Wine obviously is, and if you know anything about how wine is made, wine was not invented, it was discovered. It has everything naturally there. The yeast is naturally there. So it was probably discovered, not invented. And then it was just a matter of figuring out how do you keep it from going bad, becoming vinegar, and how do you make it taste good so they can use herbs and whatever else. And so there was a development of improving wine, but wine's been around for a long period of time. And one of the things so I was actually preaching at a church one time when I brought with me a briefcase, and I had a Bible in the briefcase, and the briefcase was closed. So this church has a tradition of before you do your regular sermon, you bring all the little kids up, and you have a mini sermon that's sort of like a mini version of the bigger sermon. So first you tell us kids' version of it, and then you go to a bigger version of it, right? So the kids come forward. So I had this briefcase. And I said in there, I have in this briefcase one of the most dangerous things on the planet. What do you think it is? And little kids, they raise their hand. Is it a bomb? The kids are going, yeah, I'm going to bring a bomb to church. Is it a gun? Is it a hand grenade? These kids, the kids are. And I opened it up, and it was my Bible. And I said, it's the word of God is sharper than a two-edged sword.
That's right.
But it's and a lot of people have been damaged by it, but that's not the fault of the Bible. That's the fault of people who have misused it.
Yeah.
And the problem is the reality, and hearing the point was, some of the best things in life are also some of the most dangerous things in life and abused things in life. Right. Back in the 1960s, there was only half a dozen venereal disease. Now we have 100 of them, and a lot of them are fatal. And a lot of them are incurable. So the issue is abuses, not uses in the proper context, in the proper times, and so forth. Right. So there's sort of an analogy there, and the people are like turning out because now they're getting a sermon here. But I don't care. So the thing is with whiskey is either you are using the whiskey in a right way, or it's using you.
Yeah.
Either you have it or it has you. And Daniel says he drinks it. It's something that is dangerous, which is why he doesn't drink cocktails, because this whiskey will tell you, I will kill you.
Yeah.
And you have to respect it.
Absolutely.
And it's like if you're working in, so when I took 4 years of a wood shop, in the beginning of the class, the teacher would tell you, see, I have all my 10 fingers.
Yeah.
I haven't lost any of them. If you're goofing around in here, you're going to lose your fingers and you could die to a saw or something.
Yeah.
And yet how important are those tools for making very fine furniture?
Yeah.
Well, it's the same thing is either you're in control of it and you're behaving yourself and you respect it, or electricity, right? You talk to an electrician about the dangers of you fry yourself.
Yeah.
So you gain, and Roy talks about this as well, that it causes you to slow down and respect it.
Yes.
Rather than abuse it. And so it takes a discipline to enjoy it without abusing it. And if it's really, really good, if you get yourself schnocked, you might as well be drinking the garbage.
Yeah, exactly. You might as well be on the PBRs or something. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And really, I think Scotch is just, even the price point kind of dictates how you would drink it. It's even, even a bottle of wine, you can get a half. Well, you may disagree being an expert, but you can get a half decent bottle of wine for less than $15, right? And
well, you have to know where to look.
If you know where to look,
Spain has some great wines for very inexpensive wines. Spain is one of your best buys.
But it's the same thing, that's less impact to you and more damage that you can do. But for a good single malt, for a single malt that like for this, so the lower, I don't know what you paid for it, but I paid about $130 for that. It would be
plus tax,
okay,
which takes you to it was $131 with tax.
Okay, it would be wild to consume that. I mean that's. I don't know anybody who could afford to tan, as we say in Scotland, a bottle of Scotch for that reason. That's why a lot of these cheaper blends exist. Why why they're just not very good. But yeah, I think the Bible tells us everything in moderation, and really the bottom line, I think, where people maybe get tied up a little bit sometimes and get frustrated with what they call religion, but if we're talking specifically about Christianity, is that the reason why any of the statutes of God exist is for us to enjoy a fuller, freer life, and there's greater freedom within boundaries. And that boundary of having self-control, which is one of the fruits of the spirit, is one of the it's a key to life. But why would you not want to enjoy some of man's finest creations? I mean, if my mum, when I was getting into it, my mum and dad don't drink whiskey; they're not interested. But my mum, when I was kind of showing her all this stuff, she made a comment. She said, it's like an art form when you think about it. And I was like, that's exactly it. It's like an art form that you can consume. And when you find a beautiful painting, you want to spend time looking at it and exploring it and thinking about it. And, you don't kind of, sort of crumple up and put it in the trash, which is what the equivalent, I think, would be. So everything in moderation, man. And I have kind of a 2 dram limit I set myself, just because of the strength of the alcohol is just too much. You can feel it, you can feel it quickly. So, but that's a personal thing,
But if I still get a faint taste of this right now. It's mostly, the smoke and the chocolate character. And I like where I live because it's like in the middle of summer, it's 60 degrees Fahrenheit. It stays cold there, which keeps me more in the mood for having peated whiskeys, because peat is really my category. And plus, it rains here a lot, like in Scotland. But in my study, this is how my day starts. First, I'm old, so first thing you do, you got to go pee, right? Because you got to go. And then I come downstairs, get the pot of coffee going, drink some water. You should start your day with water to hydrate. And once the pot's ready, I go back upstairs. And I spend the first 2 hours of my day studying my Bible, doing theology stuff in prayer, and wake up with the coffee. And then I take my shower, get dressed, and head off to work. One of the things that's really, really cool is if you've had a wee dram, particularly peated, all right, and you had it the night before, and leave the glass on
Yes.
the desk.
Yes.
Yeah, and you come in and from the night before and just smell it.
I love that. I've been telling people about that. Leave your glass out overnight. Don't clean it. Leave it. It's
Yeah.
like a little extra "I love you" in the morning.
Yeah, yeah,
It's,
yeah. What it reminds me of, say, like when you read about, the burning of incense inside the temple or so forth.
yeah.
It's like this. It's sort of like, or like in the Anglican tradition, maybe in Roman Catholic Church and Eastern Orthodox, where they still burn incense and so forth. And and if you have more than one there, you could if I shut the door, if I come in the morning, the whole room smells.
I know.
It's
It's a
just like,
wonderful thing.
it's just
Es-
that's really good.
Especially any peated whiskey, like if the glass dries out overnight, you just take a little nose of it, and it's just beautiful. It's such a lot. It's like the after if you had a bonfire the night before and you go out in the morning, you smell it, it's still there, and
Yeah,
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 it's great.
yeah.
It's great, and it's also good with non-peated whiskies as well.
Yeah.
I've been getting into space sides a lot recently, and a lot of the unpeated space sides are not one of the outliers, but the sort of traditional space side. You get this kind of smooth, really kind of caramelly, lovely glass in the morning. So yes, it's a great practice. It's a kind of a fun thing to do that.
Yeah. So one of the things I like about your channel, and it's very, I don't do this in videos, but I think in my mind, there's a lot of analogies between the walk of faith and a whiskey. We just talked about self-control and how something that's very, very, very good can be abused and so forth. But if you look at trials and tribulations, and then you look at the study of the history of both in the wine world and the whiskey world, that anybody who's going to start a distillery, either they had a ton of money to begin with, or they don't care. They have a passion for it, and they're willing to go through all the difficulties to do what they got to do. And they're going to have ups and downs, and it's going to test them to see if they're really in for the long haul, not just some short turnaround. And how it requires teamwork, and it requires respecting of creation, and how not everything is up to you, and a lot of things are out of your. I'm going to drink a little water real quick, and not
Sure.
everything is up to you. That there's a lot that's completely dependent on providence, on God and how He provides. It's completely out of your control. So it requires a little bit of faith that, yeah, we're going to do this. We're in for this. And it's funny that even though they may not, wear it on their religion on their sleeve, do meet Christians and people of faith in the whiskey industry, and you realize, and me personally, I just find there's a lot of, particularly when you go to Scotland, you're driving on the other side of the road, the other side of the car, you're on a one-lane road that's kind of blind going around a corner, and there could be a car or a kid or a goat or a sheep in the road, and you're not sure where you're going, and you lost your GPS connection, and you're just going, Lord, please in your providence, get me where I gotta go. And you listen, and I love listening, particularly when I was traveling by myself. This last trip in April, I was listening. If you're familiar with Second Chapter of Acts,
With who? Sorry,
it's a group called Second Chapter of Acts. They don't record anymore.
I don't think so.
Oh, check them out. So it's two sisters and a brother.
Okay.
You've heard you familiar with the Easter song? Hear the bells ringing, they're singing that you can be born again. That was written by Annie Herring in Second Chapter of Acts, and her brother is Matthew Warden. He has a lot of solo albums. Anyway, they have two hymns albums. My favorite hymns albums. So check them out. Second Chapter of Acts, hymns 1 and hymns 2. It's a little bit modern version of hymns, but the harmonies are unbelievable. Anyway, this entire trip, the only thing I was listening to the entire time was Second Chapter of Acts hymns albums as I was traveling around. And it was to see the beauty of the countryside, and whether maybe catch a rainbow because there's a slight mist going on, or fog, or the sunshine, or just the beauty of the countryside and so forth, and listening to the hymns. And I felt you stop and just go, wow, this is unbelievable. I do not deserve this. I am so thankful
Yeah.
for this experience, and the privilege to be able to go out there and see the beauty of the countryside, and to visit the distilleries, taste the whiskey, and meet people,
Mhm.
and eat haggis,
Yeah.
do some iron blue.
Oh,
So,
right.
and you just give you a spirit of thankfulness and
Yeah.
gratitude. And I have so many stories where things could have gone wrong,
Mhm.
and yet in the providence. Share one. My first trip, there's a point where you get off the plane and you're heading to where the security point is, and if
Mhm.
you pass that point, you can't turn around.
Yeah.
I'm not charismatic, but but I'm like 6 feet from the no turnaround spot, and this voice in my head says, "Erik, make sure you have everything." And I was like, "Oh, I don't have my wallet."
Yeah.
So I went running back. They wouldn't let me get back on the plane, but there's two ladies standing there, flight attendants. I think I left my wallet on the plane. They go, sure enough, it had my passport, credit cards, ID. I would have had, if I'd gone past it, I would have had to gone all the way through security and stuff.
Yeah.
By that time, the plane probably would have moved on.
Yeah.
And I mean, and that's me being stupid. And I kind of go, I think angels are traveling with me, because there's all these times I come this close to just doing something stupid.
Yeah.
And Providence comes around and fixes it for me, So, and another, you just kind of go, oh, thank you, Lord, for please. And this last trip, I was like, okay, Erik, what am I going to do that's really stupid that the Lord's going to fix it so it works out? Flat tire,
Yeah.
stuff like that,
Yeah. Yeah. I think providence is such an interesting thing because people that are not Christians could just look at that and go, well, that's just luck or good fortune or whatever. But I think the longer you go on, the more these things happen to you, and the more you see a pattern. It's that relational piece that comes in, and God knows us, we're His children. He knows what we are, what we need, and right down to the individual part of your character. What's the thing that you're likely to mess up on? I think there's constantly provision for our shortcomings. I think a massive part of I don't think any of that's transactional, but I do think that practice that you were sharing earlier on, kind of getting up, and I just did a video on quiet time a few weeks ago. I think that's such an essential practice for believers. I mean, even people that don't believe, there's a huge trend right now of influencers that are doing these morning routines, and
Yeah.
I make fun of them quite a lot because these guys are, they tell you they've basically done like an 8-hour day before 5 a.m. and it's just nonsensical. But there is something um, essential to kind of preparing yourself for the day and for the week in those first couple of hours of the morning, just and getting still before God and just sort of crying out and
Yeah.
praying and studying and stuff like that. And I find that on the days that I miss that, you're more likely to have episodes like that where things go wrong. And then you kind of see the grace of God in your life, this unmerited favor
Yeah.
for things to work out even when they shouldn't. But providence is such an interesting subject, especially because I think these days that people can go to a place where they start conflating that with prosperity and all these different aspects of
The whole
sort
name
of
it, claim it sort of thing. Yeah.
yeah, all that stuff, and then we live in such an interesting time where the internet has taken the limits off to everybody. So there's as much terrible content out there, Christian content out there, as there is good. In fact, there might be more this
Oh
bad
yeah. Oh
than
yeah.
it's good. And
Yeah.
but the kind of the ability to kind of have insight as to what's good and what's not, to be able to figure that out on the fly. That's providence in itself. It's to be, okay,
One
this
of the
is
things
good.
I was gonna say I like about your channel is you talk about a whiskey, but it's not unrelated to the topic at hand. That you have you sort of like I was talking about analogies between of wine through through the Bible, whether literally or and the vines that are symbolically, is also to use whiskey as an analogy for things in life. And so that's
Yeah.
something you do in your channel is you'll talk about a whiskey and think about the whiskey, but then also bring whether it's a Bible verse or a Christian topic or subject, and you'll tie the two together. And it's one of the things I really appreciate about what you do there. So I do that in my head. I just don't do that on my channel, and on my, and elsewhere. I don't talk about whiskey. I don't sit around at church talking about whiskey and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
But you do tend to draw the two together, which you do. And if you're into gardening, you're going to draw gardening in with, or whatever it is, you're doing, cleaning your house or whatever. You can find things that are corollary between the two.
Well, I think like the genesis of the channel was just, I kind of realized that I was just thinking through some of the best conversations I've ever had with people about God, whether they've been believers or not. It's generally been through having a couple of beers with somebody, or having a dram, or whatever it's been, or I know a lot of guys that in our church we've got this kind of splinter group, secret group that cigars, boys that kind of sit around the fire and have cigars and stuff. And some of the deepest conversations come out of those combinations, and so it's an easy pairing. And for me, like what the little bio on my channel just says, these have been two of the greatest pleasures of my life, is to kind of contend with the Word of God and to enjoy, to just sit and enjoy a really good dram of whiskey. And so why would you not put them together? I mean, the only reason you wouldn't do it is through fear, and I kind of decided to part company with fear.
Yeah.
Quite some time ago, because I've just seen it hold people back so badly, but still trying to approach it with humility and caution. Like I said, I'm completely aware that it's a no-fly zone for some denominations, some people but I just am not that worried about it, because I'm pretty comfortable with my position on it.
There's the fear of God, and then there's the fear of man.
Well, and there's
the Proverbs tell us the fear of God is the beginning of knowledge and wisdom.
Exactly, and there's the comfort of the Holy Spirit. I think what people often forget about that is that and even the fear. If you wanted to get into that, the fear of God isn't being afraid of God; it's just having reverence and respect. And but there are people who I think treat that as fear, and they do live a life of fear. But Romans tells us it was for freedom that Christ set us free. We're meant to live in freedom and enjoy that freedom, and part of that freedom is God's creation, and what He's given us, and what man has been able to do with creation, and the kind of the extent of what we've been able to do, and all this stuff is a foretaste of heaven, and but in terms of the analogies, Eric, like I would say, that's providence, because I sometimes I just open my mouth and hope for the best. So I think that sometimes I'll come away from it and I'll be editing a video and I'll be like, oh man, it's a good point, and I didn't even maybe realize that I was saying that at the time. But I just tried to start it with something I've been thinking about, and then pair it with a whiskey, and then just kind of hope for the best.
So do you do cigars as well?
I'm not in any way an aficionado, but I do enjoy the odd cigar. Yeah,
I'm asthmatic, and I talked about before we were live. Heavy duty. Oh, really? I'm heavy duty with allergies. So actually, pastor of the church I'm at, he just had it was a couple of weeks ago after church, had to get together at his house with cigars. And I go to bed super early, so I can't stay up late on Sunday night. I got to get up early. I get up at 3 or 4 a.m. on a Monday, so I'm not staying up late. But I can't. The cigars, even if I like the smell of it, I just can't be. And cologne, perfume, heavy detergents, I can't be around that either. I'm just react to it. But but this is for people who like cigars. This would be a cigar and whiskey pairing there. So what I like about this whiskey, talk a little bit more about the whiskey. There is an earthiness, there's a sweetness, there's a spice as well, and so there's these sort of counterbalances there. But the one thing I'm not getting a whole lot is fruit. Do you get any like fruit characters out of this?
No, not so much fruit. And the other thing I think I think we already said this, but the kind of trademark Laphroaig medicinal iodine type note is not there either, which I find really interesting, because I think it's there in almost every other Laphroaig. Maybe not so much in the Cardias, but
I wonder if the cask is sort of covering those characters, or they've aged it enough. I would say this. I take back. I do get a little lemon and lime on
Mm,
towards the back, which is sort of Laphroaig and Ardbeg. You get that, and mint. After you
mhm,
swallow it, if you pay attention, it's like York's peppermint patty. We get the
mhm.
mint, and then it's covered in chocolate. I definitely get the York's peppermint patty character on the back end, which I like that, and that's classic Laphroaig.
Yeah, it's classy. Yeah, it's lovely. Um, and there's more. I'd say there's more mint in this. That's actually part of the flavor profile than there is in like so Lagavulin 16 where you get the sensation of mint, that kind of lifting feeling on your tongue,
Yeah,
but you do actually get a little bit of the flavor of mint with this, which is very I think what I like about this the most is it is incredibly complex, but even though it's expensive and it might be intimidating, it's totally approachable.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's definitely it's a peathead's whiskey, no question about it. Like if you're not into peat, you're not going to like this. But
yeah.
if you're into peat, I think this is like Christmas Day. It's fantastic.
Do you have any particular? So I'm a big Ardbeg fan, obviously. Got
Yep.
Ardbeg by there. I'm a big Ardbeg fan of the core range. A lot
Mm,
of their experimental stuff I'm not been real big on. I love Bunnahabhain in terms of non-peated, particularly the 12-year-old. So Ardbeg 10, peated Southern Islay, Bunnahabhain 12, and that's bourbon cask.
yep.
Bunnahabhain 12 is bourbon and sherry cask and non-peated. So you got north, south. You got bourbon cask, you got sherry cask, peated, non-peated. So those are two that I tend to recommend a lot, and those are two of my favorites. Of course, everybody loves Springbank, and that's the reason why I can't get Springbank is because everybody loves it. So, do you have any particular favorites?
Yeah, I do. I love Dalmore. I love Dalmore.
Oh, really? Okay.
I do. It was just it's just a completely different profile, but it just reminds me of Christmas. I think
Okay.
probably Dalmore 12. The sherry cask version is lovely.
Yeah.
I love Craigallachie has been my favorite. It was actually on the award show just there. I thought it would have placed a little higher, but the Craigallachie 13 I've been getting into recently. I've been telling people it's a great alternative to Springbank because it's kind of some of the same notes in there, but I find that to be like a really interesting but really drinkable, smooth um, whiskey. But yeah, I'm like you. I like the core range. I, I don't know how you feel, but I'm always a little suspicious of like the special releases, the non-age statement ones, because I always wonder, is this just surplus? They're just trying to get rid of it and be clever, and like
Yeah.
I kind of don't I don't like spending the money on it, you know. And non-age
Yeah,
statement.
200 bucks, 175, $200.
Yeah.
It's like,
Do you know which I really loved that I had last year? I don't have a bottle of it right now, but I loved the Aberlour Abana.
oh,
That,
Budna. Yeah, 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 yeah.
oh, gorgeous! I thought it was
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
fantastic.
Got a couple of those. So interesting. So Abuna, one of the interesting about them is they will finish the whiskey in sherry cask, finish the whiskey in bourbon cask, and then blend that,
Yeah,
which is what you do with a wine,
yeah,
rather than finishing in this cask and then putting it into this cask.
yeah,
So you
yeah.
can actually make your own Abudna and make your own blends. Buy them the two separately, and then blend them however you want to.
Ah,
And yeah, quality price ratio in terms of like a high, batch strength because they're different batches. That's a really really nice whiskey.
yeah, lovely, lovely. Try to think of something else that I had this year. Probably my favorite whiskey this year. I don't know when it came out, but I consistently go back to it is the Benriach Smoky 12.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Just because I love the fact that it's a bit of an outlier. You know, it's a peated Speyside, but I just think it hits every note. It's got lovely sweetness. It's incredibly smooth. It's got that kind of sweet smoke to it, and it's pretty affordable.
Yeah.
The I haven't had the 10 yet, but the 12 year of the
I have an
Smoky
old.
12.
I have it because they changed their labels. I have an
Yeah,
old
they did.
10 year. I have the older 10.
Yeah, lovely, lovely whiskey.
Yeah, really, really, really nice.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I visited Benrick in my last trip. Really, really
nice.
enjoyed it. Yeah, yeah, it was
I
cool.
think you might have seen more of Scotland than I have.
I have seen probably more Scott than most Scottish people.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I grew up here in the San Francisco Bay Area, but until I was going to move out of the area, there were a lot of things I didn't see here. I thought, wow, before I moved, I didn't know I wasn't planning on coming back. So I thought, well, before I move, I should go see all the tourist things. I hadn't been on a trolley in San Francisco. I had
Yeah.
been, I hadn't walked across the Golden Gate Bridge. So all of a sudden I had this, a tourist list. I needed to check off these things before I leave the area. I moved down to San Diego and ended up coming back. But I thought, oh man, there's all things I've never done. Because if
Yeah.
you live there, you're like, well,
I know.
you
You take it for granted. I mean, we're the same way now. Whenever we go back, there's a bunch of things that I want to do. Like we always go through to Edinburgh to see the castle and the Royal Mile and everything. And then like the last time we went to Skye and like a couple of different day trips. But when you grow up in a place, you don't
Yeah.
you're a little bit ignorant to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you lead worship at church with a guitar?
And not right now. I have the fortune of playing in an incredibly talented worship team right now. So I play mostly lead guitar or I step in on bass or piano when needed. But I used to lead worship in my last church for about 7 years. But I'm actually to be honest with you, man, I'm kind of enjoying not having that responsibility. That's something I really took seriously. I think there's kind of I mean, this is a whole thing. You get into a whole debate about it, but I think that leading worship is such a responsibility, and I don't know that it's always observed as such a thing. Like, and when you think about it, most churches will give at least 50% of the stage time and the microphone time to people who are not qualified to teach, qualified pastors and whatnot.
Yeah.
So worship leaders have to be. I think they have to have a discipline that isn't always obvious. I mean, there's some great worship leaders, and there are a lot of weekend warriors, bless them, that are doing their thing. But there are definitely people who do it that they could probably benefit from, from a little understanding of the impact you can have on people.
More maturity.
Yeah,
So
maturity.
I think anytime you're up front, it's easy to the temptation to become the star of the show.
Oh yeah,
and to get to become recognized and so forth. And it can and without intending to even.
Right. I don't think
it can be a trap to where you become the person, the dude, or whatever, and it becomes more of a concert and a performance than it is worship. And
well,
slide into that.
There's been a lot. There's been so many guys over the last 4 or 5 years with this kind of trend of deconstruction that's happening that have come out, and a lot of those guys haven't. I think the ratio of like well-known worship leaders or guys who've been in Christian bands to pastors is probably higher. That have come out and deconstructed and kind of questioned everything, but I mean. And again, that's kind of a can of worms. But I do think that there's an element of getting a free pass as a worship leader. If you get any kind of musical talent, or you've got an ability, or if you're just somebody's favorite, that happens sometimes as well. But really the effect of having that shared amount of presence and microphone time. Yeah, you've really got to handle that carefully, And I'm seeing now. I think within the church now, I think one of the things that is happening, as much as we're seeing deconstruction and a bunch of kind of crazy stuff coming in the back door, there is also a return to orthodoxy happening. I'm seeing it with my day job, kind of as we resource churches. We're seeing that this kind of desire of churches to come back to that, and a lot of that is from pastors who are like, "Hey, we want to give our teams like a really solid place theologically to operate from." And most of the time when they're talking about teams, they're talking about their worship guys, their youth leaders, anybody that does a small group. We want to make sure that you guys are not teaching TikTok theology. And worship leaders, they're so susceptible to that because there's less temptation, I think, for a pastor to go with trend and style, although that definitely happens. But in music, it's all about trend and style, whether it's a musical trend and style or whether it's, an actual, some of these guys have become bona fide celebrities now, and some of them are great. And, I've had the fortune of meeting quite a few of them since I've been in Nashville, and most of them are absolutely, great guys, and girls. But, there's definitely some that are kind of, that are fast and loose, and
see, that's the trap, man. So for a YouTube channel, one, oh, I have this many subscribers, this many subscribers, and it can become about the subscribers, and
Yeah.
it's just a vanity thing. And
Yeah.
if you start to get your sense of worth and value out of it, then it becomes about chasing subscribers
Mm.
and chasing fame and the size of my oh, I have more subscribers than they do, and all that nonsense. And that's very parallel to how branding and marketing can take over a distillery so that it's not about the whiskey and making quality, making a craft and an art. It's about chasing numbers and meeting the bottom of the barrel and the bottom line and using a lot of schlock and shtick and uh, tricks to get people to get into it rather than being about truth, about truth, you know? And so when you do the same thing in the church, then it's no longer about truth. It's about numbers. How big is the church? How popular are we? And the size of it, and of course the almighty dollar coming in, right? There's a lot of parallels between running a whiskey business and being about the truth and the integrity of the whiskey versus the mass product to get the mass consumers, to get the people in, to get the money. And there's a different philosophy or worldview behind those two. And when you take that to the church, then you have these televangelists who are worth $750 million, have multiple jet airplanes, you know, and it's all about the name it and claim it, and they're going to continue the message in such a way to get the money. And you know they're liars and frauds, and they got all kinds of women going on or other things going on, and eventually they get caught, you know, and then it's a big scandal. But it's like, duh, dude, you can see the trajectory of where this goes. And it's a trap. And you may start off wanting to do for truth and integrity, but when you start leaning, hey, doing things the way the world wants you to do it, the way the enemy, the adversary wants you to do it, and being tempted and giving into it, then you can go in that direction. And I'm not going to name names, but I see some YouTube channels where I am theologically in agreement with them, and I don't think they're aware of it, but they are already doing the marketing shtick to grow their channel because they're chasing numbers. Because they're chasing numbers rather than being about the message. Rather than being about the message, it's Laphroaig, or rather than an integrity malt. It's about at 48% alcohol by volume, non-chill, their natural color, If I draw a parallel, it's rather being about the truth of the message, death, burial, resurrection of Jesus Christ, you know, and the forgiveness of sins and the grace of God, the truth of the gospel. It becomes about all the other shtick, and then it really becomes man-centered. And the way you can tell this is they start naming ministries after themselves.
They
name colleges and schools. They put their name on a Bible. I'm not going to name names. I'm saying the name Joe Schmuckatelli. This is the Joe Schmuckatelli Study Bible.
I know.
But
I know
it's the same thing. And so, having studied I studied wine marketing, I've studied whiskey marketing, read a lot of marketing books, and I know the games that can be played. And when I watch Christians do it with the church, I'm like, that is the way the world does things, and that's not the way Jesus did things. You know, John chapter 6, he gives a message, and people are like, I'm out, bye.
Yeah,
you know, people leave. And this is what he says to the disciples. So you're going to leave too?
Yeah.
Peter says, where else are we going to go?
To whom should we go?
Yeah. Where else are we going to go? And so if you could preach the hardline truth and not care about the results.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, and that's where the rubber meets the road, really. You know, what's your motivation for doing anything? You know, I mean, it's funny that because when you start doing a YouTube channel, you naturally, okay, well, how do I do this better? So you can go down a rabbit hole of some of these guys who do it, and you know, and then you start realizing this is kind of an echo chamber, really. It's this vacuous journey that you go down with people that are talking about, well, to get your first 100 subscribers, you do this, and to get your first 1,000, you do this, and blah blah blah. And there's a new method every week, you know, and you could get so consumed by that. You know, I think the first sign that that's a problem is just takes the joy out of it, you know. And if there's no there's no joy in it. I don't want to do it. Like, I mean, I didn't post the video this week because honestly, I had other things going on, and I was like, I'm not in this for that end game. Now, I'm not going to pretend I wouldn't like to get the channel monetized, but honestly, like, that is for one reason and one reason alone, which is that whiskey is expensive, and I'd like it'd be cool if this channel would pay for itself, you know,
Right.
because I've got teenage kids to feed, so there's an economic equation there, but really, if one of the reasons why I kind of put a disclaimer that I'm not a teacher, I'm not a Bible teacher, is because Bible teachers are held to a higher standard, and so there is. And that's an eternal thing. That's not an earthly thing. And so, you don't want to play with fire. The way I look at it is if my channel, if anything I ever say on my channel is an encouragement to somebody, it's kind of it's the Billy Graham equation. I can't remember the name of the guy, but there was a guy who spoke somewhere, and one of the people he reached was Billy Graham. And so, what if you had 100 subscribers from now until the day you die, but you were able to reach somebody who was then able to go on and change the world through the gospel. Like that, you have to mean that. If you're going to say that, you have to mean that. And so much of Christianity, if you're being real about it, is being willing to walk the walk and not just talk the talk. And so I think in all things we do on earth, that there's a reality of having to be able to put food on the table, and there's a reality of wanting to do something with excellence. But then there's also a far greater reality, which is we have to answer for everything we do. At some point, we'll get to that point where we have to answer for the things we've done, things we've said, and
I can say it. And we could. There's so many things I've said and done that's just unbelievably stupid.
Yeah.
Stupid. And then you go, okay, I got to go back and delete that. That was stupid.
Yeah, I was going to say there's whole videos that I just haven't posted because I haven't been happy with it, and not from a production standpoint or anything like that, but I've just looked at it and gone, like, the whole point of this was to try and be encouraging and try and say something that's worth saying. And if I'm not hitting that as a benchmark, then I'm just not going to post it. Like, I'm not so desperate for this thing to go, like, that I'm just going to post whatever, and the temptation is always there, man, to like, okay, I post once a week. Like, every YouTube guru will tell you should be posting at least 3 times a week, but I don't have time for that, man. I certainly don't have the Scotch collection for it.
Once a week is fine.
Yeah,
worry about quality, not quantity.
Yeah, I think so. Wherever it goes is wherever it goes. It's not going to define me. Like I said, I spent a long time before I even launched this thing really prayerfully considering whether or not it was a good idea. And so if I ever get to the point where I feel like it's not, then I'll just gracefully bow out. But I'm definitely not going to be.
Think about it, and if nothing else, it was a way that you and I met.
There we go.
And made a little connection and hung out in fellowship. It was cool.
Yeah,
even if it doesn't come anything more than that.
Well, who knows?
So, so what do you? I mean, I don't know. So I'm trying to. I'm now seeing I'm going to be seeing a specialist regarding sinus and all that, so I can go back and hopefully, Lord willing, pass the Master Scotch exam, and then I'll probably shift actually to bourbon and do videos on bourbon production and all that. Do you have a general idea of what you want to do with your channel down the future, or just you're sort of winging it?
Yeah, I'm just kind of feeling it out. Anybody who looks at my channel as we speak is going to see that I've got about 106 subscribers. So like, it's not like I have some master plan. The way I look at this is, as long as this is there are a couple of comments saying, hey, this helped me, or this made me think about it, then you're kind of achieving that. I was challenged, I'll say this, a few weeks ago at church by a guy who was talking about the talents, parable of the talents.
Yeah.
And the whole point of the talents was that they were designed to not be buried, but to be, to be invested and to be capitalized upon, not monetarily necessarily, but in terms of like expanding for the kingdom. And so if anything I do, you know, I'm involved in music, I'm involved in church and different things. If anything I do goes out and becomes greater than it is when it was finished or when it was posted or whatever, then that's as good as I can hope for. Like, and I, you know, there's like I said, there's an economic equation where I would not be upset if the channel started paying me every month. That'd be fine. But I'm not.
Yeah.
But yeah, long term. So there was a guy that dropped on. He found the channel. He's like, hey, you should think about doing a podcast. So that's been in my head. But I probably wouldn't want to do that until there was more of an audience. But I know. Yeah, but
priorities, you know, you have a family, it's work, family,
yeah,
church, everything else. This isn't the biggest priority in the world. You know, it's kind of a side gig, and there's always a temptation to where you can start neglecting something else to put more time into this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you don't want to get, like I said, you don't want to get to a place where you're stressing about it all week. And I think like if there's grace for it, then it'll go where it's supposed to go, and that'll be fine. You know, like I have other things that I'm doing, and I think talk about providence, like God leading us to live in Nashville. There's even now, like we've been here a year and a half, and I've had 2 meetings this week, which, you know, could never have happened where living before and where I was before, and now the opportunities that are unfolding from that are like really exciting, and you're looking at God's hand in it. So yeah, there's a lot going on. So where the Scotch Scripture goes, I'm not that worried about it. I would just like to think that it would make a difference in some people's day at some point, and that if the time comes to bow out, I'll bow out. Or if it goes and it you know, it grows to 100,000 people, and it's something that people have an appetite for, and I feel like that's what we're supposed to do, then there are different ways we can take it. I mean, I know a lot of guys here who are much better orators than I am, better theologians.
But nobody has a better accent. I can tell you that straight up, man. The California, I'm an American, I'm a Californian. I find the California accent to be boring.
Well, don't move to Tennessee then, because there's probably more Californians in Tennessee.
Oh, really? A lot of people are moving to California.
Yeah.
But I mean, even like Scott Bruno over Scotch Test Dummies, he has a Kansas accent or the New York accent. I think a lot of other American accents that are a lot more interesting than because I sound like Hollywood. You know,
you look like Hollywood too, Erik.
Yeah. There we go. So, all righty. So we've been at a little over an hour. So I want to thank you very much for coming on, and I wish all the best for you. Slán va, and may the Lord bless you.
Slán va, Erik. Thank you so much for having me, mate, and God bless everybody watching. Thank you.
All right. Cheers.
Cheers, mate.
Hey, don't forget to subscribe and check out these other whiskey videos.